ultimate goal would be to go into academia to create a death education that's comprehensive and accessible to everyone.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper. And on today's episode, I have the gorgeous Symon, who is a thanatologist, but quite specifically in tech. So we're going to get into some little juicy techie bits today. Symon, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Welcome. So tell us a little bit about you. So the intro I gave was obviously a bit sort of secretive. We're trying to keep people on their toes. So tell us a little bit. Actually, if you wouldn't mind explaining thanatology, because not everybody that listens knows what that means as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is in end-of-life care. I've actually worked as a hospice volunteer since I was in middle school, and that led me into the field of thanatology. I always knew I wanted to study death and dying, but I didn't know that there was a field specifically dedicated to that study. And so what thanatology is the study of death and dying. So it comes from the same root as Thanos, like death and the god of death. And ology is the study of. So thanatology. More recently, I've gotten into thanatechnology, which is combining thanatology with technology fields. I'm particularly interested in how increased access to different end-of-life care resources online helps people make more autonomous end-of-life care decisions. And I think that can be done through a bunch of different technological resources or advancements. But that's kind of what technology and thanatechnology have to do with one another.
And it's such a fascinating space. And anybody who's been listening to the podcast, especially I think probably the last season and part of this season 5, will know that I have a big interest in tech and sort of digital death and like how we're preserving it, our legacies, and how it can help with grief and how it can hinder it and all of the different aspects, because it really is. I mean, in some ways, it's one of the things I always say, pre-planning and planning funerals, the environment and the digital tech side of funerals. If I could, those are my 3 obsessions, but each of them are such a massive thing that you have to choose. You had to choose one. So I'm fascinated always to have conversations with people who are very much in the space of one of those 3. So you're in research mode at the moment? Are you writing? Are you speaking? Like is there an end goal or what's the process?
Yeah, all of the above. So currently, I run a death tech startup where we have been developing an app that we are currently calling AI Death Doula, but that remains to be seen what it will be called when we actually release it, with the goal of compiling a bunch of different end-of-life care resources into one location where it can then be queried against to give location-specific answers to people either who are dying themselves or to grieving loved ones or just curious people who have questions about death and dying. I am also hoping to continue my research in a PhD program, and I'm in the process of applying and interviewing right now. So who knows where that will take me. But the ultimate goal would really be to introduce thanatechnology into the thanatology education. Right now, there are very few thanatology programs. There's a couple for undergrad. There's one specifically for a master's program, and they just introduced a thanatechnology course to that master's program at Marian University. But other than that, there's really no death education that's covering this. And in the US specifically, there is no comprehensive death education that's generalized or given to the public. So you really have to seek it out yourself. And so my ultimate goal would be to go into academia to create a death education that's comprehensive and accessible to everyone.
Wow, that's fascinating. I did not know that, first of all. And second of all, yeah, it's like which is, I feel like always the way when you don't know something and somebody points it out, the obvious. It's such an important part, and it's such an important part going forward of death. is, what happens to our social accounts, what happens to all our assets online, like what happens, these AI, like our voice getting taken, our physical, the what were they called, the holograms, and all of these things that can replicate us long after we're gone, and celebrities and historians, and I just find the whole thing fascinating. But you don't, again, I didn't even kind of consider the education aspect, that yes, you have all these courses, mortician schools, all of these ways that educate people in this space, but they're not necessarily up to date anymore and staying with the times, which is hard enough as it is for each of us. But yeah, it's they really need to be a part of the education, because
Absolutely. Yeah. And the landscape of death care switches so frequently, depending on what laws are passed. Different states, different counties have such different regulations. And so having a comprehensive death care education is difficult. There's also so many different professions within death care. And I think often people think of a mortician, a funeral director, and they don't think about a death educator, a death doula, a death advocate, a grief worker. There's so many different paths, palliative care, hospice, etc., that you can go down. And I think that to have an education just to teach people that there are so many paths out there would be really helpful, because at some point all of us are going to die. We're all going to know someone who dies, and we're going to have to help with their death care in some way, shape, or form. And we currently are still death avoidant as a culture, and we don't introduce that into education at any point.
yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, just for anybody listening who doesn't know, like what you just talked about, like thanatology is different to mortuary school. So mortuary school is for you training to become a licensed funeral director here in the US. Thanatology is the broader study of death and end of life, right? So
Yeah, thanatology encompasses pre-death work like planning, death care itself, and then post-mortem care and grief work as well. So it's really the whole spectrum of death and dying.
yeah, yeah. Because I've been to a couple of thanatology, whether it's conferences and I know quite a few. But it's not actually as popular. It's not as many people. Yeah, there's not as many thanatologists even in the funeral space that you would kind of think of. I mean, as you pointed out, funerals is only one facet of thanatology, but even it's fascinating to see how few thanatologists are in the funeral space. It's kind of crazy. Mm.
It is interesting. I think it's due to just the very few programs that are out there. And I think if you don't know the word thanatology, you don't really know to look that up. If you look up death care, it typically leads you to funeral care or to palliative care and hospice. And the thanatology, more academic route, isn't typically the first thing that pops up in a Google search. And I think that could be one reason. And it's also a little bit daunting to some people. Like when I tell them what I study and what I'm interested in, it's kind of all encompassing and big on a topic that people aren't naturally comfortable with, because we don't talk about death and dying as much as we should.
Yeah.
And so I think that could be playing into it. But it is a really diverse and young field, which I think shocks a lot of people. But
Yeah.
I find it just really fun to be in that community.
Oh, that's that's good. That's interesting. I love the word fun in that space. That's good. That's great. I'm wondering now. Then this is just, don't laugh at me. This is just me bringing a bit of fun popular culture into the. Did you? I wonder, was there an increase in the study of thanatology or anything or the search when what was that movie, the Captain America or the Marvel movie? Wasn't he called Thanos or something?
Thanos, yeah. I have no idea, but I bet maybe there is, or people at least understood like what the word meant now.
Yeah.
Because people will be like, oh, like Thanos when I say thanatology, which before they didn't as much. So
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, I guess when you put in that search term, you're going to get either some Marvel comic character or the study of death and end of life. And what can I ask? Like, what brought you on this journey? Like, what?
I had always been interested in end of life care my entire life. I was always a little bit more comfortable with deaths than other people. I never really shied away. It was really common in my family to have open casket funerals, to be interacting with our deceased loved ones. My family's really large, and I was lucky enough to know my great grandparents, for example. And so we were very much part of the death of our family members. And that just made me more comfortable with it. And then when I was 12, my mom's dad was dying, and my parents let me not go to the first few weeks of school and stay with him while he was dying at home. And we had in-home hospice. And that was really my first like interaction with hospice. I had known what it was, but I had never met someone who worked in hospice or been part of that. And so I stayed. I learned pretty much everything I could and absorb in that moment, and read every pamphlet they gave us. And I knew that I wanted to start hospice volunteering. And so I went back home to Utah. He died in Virginia. Went back home to Utah and contacted a hospice facility in our area, and became the youngest certified hospice volunteer there, in the state, actually. And I did that for a long time. I kept hospice volunteering on and off for about 10 years, all through college. And that sparked my journey, but it was really a lucky coincidences along the way of me meeting the right people. So coming into high school, I met BJ Miller, who is a palliative care physician, who had worked at Zen Hospice, and he was doing some research in the field. And I was going to live on the Navajo Nation at the time. And so I worked with him to develop a survey of hospice and end of life care practices on the Navajo Nation, bringing them back to him to do whatever he needed with that research. And from there, I knew it was kind of what I wanted to study. So I went to University of Rhode Island to study thanatology for a year, transferred to University of Southern California, where I developed a thanatology program, and was able to pull together a curriculum there, completed my master's there as well in visual anthropology, and made all of my movies about end-of-life care. And it kind of just started my whole journey into thanatology and research. And I'm really grateful because I've had so many great mentors along the way, specifically in the doula and midwife community. They've been really open to helping, being part of any project I have, whether it got me on one of my YouTube channels or testing out a new app that I developed. And so that's really how we got here. And what I'm really interested now is how do different applications, but also advancements in alternative burial methods or digital memorials, how does that help people understand all of their choices in end-of-life care and move us away from the traditional, I either have to be buried in a casket that is quite expensive in a vault in the ground, or I have to be cremated. Like, there are other options out there, and you can make your funeral feel you. And if those more conventional methods are you, that's awesome. But just knowing that you have choice and you have the ability to tell people what you want while you're dying. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that all of that is going to be encompassed in this app you're working on, the startup you were saying, or is?
I would love to compile all of what I know into one app, but that is quite hard, for a lot of reasons. When you're uploading content, there's inherent biases in the information you're putting into an app. And I feel that it's really important to have a comprehensive, culturally aware, a very diverse amount of resources put into this application. And I think we just aren't there yet. We just don't have enough. and so I don't feel it's ready for everyone to like publicly consume. But my ultimate goal would be to be able to pull from so many different people and areas of knowledge that we can have an app that can answer niche questions like, can I bury my mom in my backyard? Or if I want my dad to be at home with us for 3 days, what's the proper way to care for his body in those days, and things like that. I want it to be able to answer anything, and I want it to be able to answer it location specifically, with culturally conscious answers dependent on religion, culture, region, etc. And so that's my ultimate goal. Where we stand right now is I have been applying to a bunch of funding, but currently funding is up in the air in the US. So who knows what's happening, especially with the NIH and health research, which is where this falls. And so that's why I sighed, because it's really out of our hands at this point. But I had an amazing team of students pulled together all the code for this and worked so hard on developing the app. And it is a fully functioning app that can be downloaded. I just think it hasn't gone through the enough ethical considerations to give it to grieving or dying individuals.
Yeah, yeah. And that is a major bump that you have to get over. Yeah, it's something that for me, I came from a business aspect. Most people know my story, but I came from business, degree in business, and then I went on into event management and PR and communications and all that sort of stuff. So like coming into this space from that, there's lots of things I wanted to do and ways I wanted to market things, but you can't. Marketing to a couple that are looking forward to getting married and have saved for years is a completely different thing to somebody who is grieving and somebody's dying either or has passed. And it's marketing in this space is so difficult because you never want to hurt. You never want the outcome to be adding more hurt. But at the same time, you are a business. And so this is what, like, the argument in the funeral space about whether it's an industry or not. And I'm like, if it is, like, it is. And I think we just call a spade a spade. It is. If you're selling products and services to people who are going to consume them, the supply and demand, the profit, it's like, to me, it is. But I understand the other rhetoric where it's like, but they don't want it to sound like it's a car manufacturers or it's an industry, like, and you're in, the smoke and there's all this. And I'm like, well, that's human beings.
It is an industry. I mean, the funeral industry is one of the biggest industries in the US, and it has a lot of money funneled through it every single day. I think that, to me, the way around that is a lot of pre-planning. Like, if we were able to have the difficult conversations earlier, which to different people that means different things, but if you are able to talk to the people around you about what you want at your funeral. Do you even want a funeral? Are you hoping to have a party instead? Like, there's a million ways to go about your end of life care, which I think encompasses funeral care and grief care as well. And I think that if those conversations were had before they needed to be had, it will kind of turn the industry on its head, because you couldn't then really upsell someone in the time of grief because they would know the plan already. And if they want to buy whatever it is that's being sold already, that's great, and they will know that. But I think the reason that the funeral industry right now gets a lot of shade is because it's coming in at a time when people are most vulnerable, and they have never thought about themselves as a consumer within the funeral industry.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, because every single person is going to be at some point. And so it's ironic that the one thing we're going to have to do is the thing no one wants to talk about.
Yeah. No, I mean, you might not always get married. You might not. Everyone doesn't have a bar mitzvah. Everyone doesn't have a baby shower. Yeah, but a funeral is the one party we're all invited to at some point. Whether and that's even whether you have a funeral. It's that's another thing. And there's, like, I've worked with a lot of people, and we've had several guests where talking about home burials and stuff like that. And I'm very much an advocate for the funeral profession in and of itself. Like, I think there's incredible funeral directors out there. Not everybody's out to sort of beg, steal, or borrow, or whatever it might be, from people. But even the people who are at the higher end of it and who are charging certain prices, like, I also I do defend that too, because I'm just like, as a consumer, like if I'm faced with a couple of different handbags, I might not want the cheapest one. I might want the more expensive one. And it's about what we value. If I value a giant soiree for my funeral and I've pre-planned it, then like that's what I want. And so I don't think to me, it's so important. And I feel as a writer who's kind of, I'm a journalist, as in I've written for publications, I've obviously written my books and stuff. I wish we'd stop constantly referring to price in this space, because it's not, it's about what you value. Like I personally do not value a casket. I personally do not value embalming for me. It's not to say there are incredible embalmers out there. I've seen their work. There's beautiful caskets out there, and there's people who make them by hand. I went to Guyana 2 years ago and saw them like hand making all these caskets. Like, so I just personally don't want it for me. And that's where I think we need to sort of get rid of the word pricing and stop tackling the funeral space on pricing and this price gouging and all that. Because unfortunately, like every other industry, especially in the current climate, there's going to be tariffs and there's going to be taxes that we have to pay. I mean, all the caskets coming from Canada, China and Mexico now, that's going to be a fun time. So yeah, it's just, I wish especially the media, I wish the media would back the F off on pricing and like share heartwarming stories that funeral directors have done, share some good and some bad news in the space, as opposed to, it just being focused on pricing. There were some lovely stories and there were some horrific stories that came out during COVID of things funeral directors did and didn't do for families and, stuff. So
I totally agree. I think that a lot of that also comes from, there's this idea that a funeral director is a certain type of person. And based off of what I have heard and the stereotypes that I know of, it's typically older white male, and from the people I know, that is not what makes up the funeral industry. And so I wonder if that is kind of all grouped in together with the pricing, because I agree with you, it should be whoever wants that expensive casket or no casket at all and have a green burial, that is completely their prerogative. And to me, what's important is that they know they have choice. And so knowing that you can buy that casket, or you can order an urn off of Amazon, or at any funeral home, you can ask if you can bring your own casket with you. And there's so many choices out there that I think people don't even know about. Yeah. And to me, the conversation might move away from price if people are aware of their options, because then the expensive thing is just one of the other choices they know they have, rather than feeling pigeonholed into one space or another.
Yeah, and I think that's where it also comes down to, it's the one time in your life, if you haven't pre-planned, it's the one time in your life that you are up against a clock, sort of. I know you can have time and stuff, but there is an immediacy. There's like an urgency, sorry, not should I say an urgency, to making some decisions and to making decisions on pricing. And so, and also one of my pet peeves as well is that sometimes the funeral director sitting in front of you might not know all the options. And it's not that they're doing a bad job, like, or they're trying to be like a car salesman. It's just that they don't know that, oh, I could actually drive your loved one to another state to have them acclimated or to have them composted or whatever. Like there's in some ways for a space that has a lot of continuing education, there's a lot of funeral directors out there who don't have the knowledge, which I think is something that needs to be changed massively too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually just working with a woman whose parent died unexpectedly, and I was working as like a death advocate on her behalf. And her parent had wanted to have their body donated to science, but due to the circumstances of their death, couldn't have that happen. And she really didn't think that they'd want to be cremated or buried. But the funeral director in their area truthfully just did not know of any other options and was like, we don't have anything else here. And so we worked with a different funeral home in Washington State to have the body transported across state lines to be teramated, which is human composting. And it was a fascinating process from my outside perspective, because typically when I'm working with people, they kind of know their choices already. Like if you know about Terramation, there's only so many groups out there and you're going to already have that knowledge in a lot of cases. It was interesting to see someone fully have to explore a new alternative in the midst of their grief. And it was within days, because if you want your body donated to science, it needs to happen typically in the first like 48, 72 hours. When that isn't on the table anymore, is when the pre-planning really does matter, because you can know like, oh, my mom or my dad really wants this to happen. But if the paperwork wasn't in place, if they died in an unexpected way, if you want an autopsy now, there's so many factors that play into this, that having that plan for like what's our plan B is so important. And so I just got to kind of watch that firsthand happen. And it was a different experience than most people I have been alongside with in the death process, because usually there's not that switch up right at the end of like, okay, we're not going down this route, we're going a different route, because most people do still pick a conventional burial or cremation. And so it was an interesting process to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I wish you the best of luck with this app. I hope it, because we're all about getting the right information to the right people in an ethical way. So we wish you the best of luck with the app and with all your future endeavors. I hope you keep researching. I hope you get the PhD and everything, and we'll stay in touch and you'll keep us in the loop, hopefully, of everything, and maybe we'll have you on in season, I don't know, 10. Who knows? And you can give us an update on that. So that'd be great. Thank you so much for joining us, Symon. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the space.